Hey there, and welcome to Family Twist. I'm Corey, and this week we're lighting a few candles because it's our podcast's third birthday. To mark the occasion, we're going back to where it all began, Kendall's story. This year, we're diving even deeper into the twists and turns of his journey, new details, new insights, and new conversations that continue to reveal just how complex and healing family discovery can be. Today's episode features a guest who really resonates with us, playwright Brian Stanton. If you've been with us since the early days, you might remember some of this conversation, but the version we aired back then was a bit truncated. So now, for the first time, we're sharing our full conversation with Brian because his story, like Kendall's, shows how the stage can be a powerful space for confronting identity and transforming family trauma into something honest and artful. Fun fact, Kendall and I met because of the theater, so it feels especially meaningful to celebrate this milestone with someone who shares our belief in the healing power of performance. Brian, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Corey and Kendall. I'm flattered and just thrilled to be here with you guys. And I want to start with Corey. To be such a loving and supportive partner in this journey and process it's so heartwarming as an adoptee to see that and to hear your guys' relationship and to hear your support. I've been fortunate too with a partner, my wife. I reunited with my mother when my wife and I were dating, and she's gone through this journey. And as I've become more active in the community, so many people have come up to her and said, "How are you doing this? How isn't it tough being married to an adoptee?" It's such a tough, crazy journey. I mean, they say it tongue in cheek, right? But yeah, it's so helpful for us to have that partner in this emotional up and down roller coaster of a journey. So it's very beautiful, Corey. So I want to thank you on behalf of all the adoptees who are looking for that kind of support.
I talk about my adoption really a lot. And I remember, it came up really early for us. And I remember Corey saying, "Isn't it so strange to not know where you came from?" I think he was very polite about it. He probably didn't say it in those words. And I remember way back then saying to him, "Yeah, but I'll probably never find them." This is 2005, and I don't think we ever dreamt that we were going to get to the point where we could have all these great DNA matches and, ways to find each other. But to your point, he's been with me through all of that, and thankfully has always been a catalyst for the search, Even when I would lose hope about ever finding people, he was the one saying, this is going to happen someday, Yeah.
You're a cheerleader. I know quite a bit of people who have gone through divorce after they reunite because they just learn so much about themselves, and sometimes their true selves start coming out, and it's such an emotional journey, and their partner is not very willing to go in that, this isn't the person I marry, and it's great to have that.
Well, and I think it's always been really important to me to have Kendall feel part of my family because, when we met, both of his adopted parents had already been gone for a long time, and his stepmother lived several hours away. And so, bringing him early on into my family, which is, pretty close generally, was really important. And so just so he could have that sort of sense of that. I think family has become, every day just becomes more important to us. My cousin and his girlfriend lived not far from us for a couple of years, and they spent every other weekend, stayed with us, brought their big dog and karaoke party and cooking and all the stuff, and it's just, so Kendall got to know them really well. And this is a younger cousin. So when I was a kid, we weren't super close because there was such an age difference, but no, once you're an adult, that doesn't matter as much. So
right, for sure. Yeah, we miss them a lot.
Mm-hmm. And then you guys moved close to your Kendall, your biological family, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And now you're close with
I'm close to my father and two of his other three kids. We almost always go over to my local brother's house on Easter and hang out with him and his wife and their kids. And for me, that's just huge, having grown up.
Beautiful.
I won't say alone because I had a lot of good, like cousin growing up and that sort of thing. But, I was an only child until I was almost 12 when my father remarried my stepmother after my mother had passed away. And I got stepsisters then. But, in the formative years, I feel like I was, an only kid. So,
yeah. And to that, Kendall, thank you for your courage, your emotional honesty and openness and sharing your story, and to many of us out there. So thank you for putting yourself out there and putting your voice out there, and really your heart being vulnerable. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Thank you. I admire you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, Kendall and I both have a very soft place in our hearts for playwrights and stage performers, because that's actually how we met. I was in a play, and I met Kendall at the cast party.
Yep.
I heard that. I heard you guys talk about that.
And then we got to befriend the playwright, which is just bizarre in its own right. We love live theater, and it takes a lot of bravery and gumption to do what you do. So kudos to that.
I've always loved the theater. It's a true holistic art. The whole mind, body, and spirit right up there in front of everyone. People have been doing it for thousands of years, starting out around the campfire, just storytelling. It's an art that everybody says is dying, but somehow it never dies.
I encourage as much as possible for the arts to stay alive in schools, because even if that doesn't end up being what you do for a living, I'm still close with many of my high school friends who I did theater with, and not many of us are still in performing arts, but the things they are doing are amazing. And I think without that foundation, who knows? Everybody who has come from the stage seems to thrive in their own way, doing something.
It's needed now more than ever. We're getting so into our phones and social media, which has all its great things. Children are becoming more and more anxious, socially anxious.
Right.
The art of theater, storytelling is so important right now. We just need to be in front of each other and talk to each other and learn from each other and create with each other.
Yes.
It's very important.
Yeah.
And starting at a young age, without a doubt.
And encouraging people to do more than just TikTok. You know what I mean? That's theatrical in itself, but let's try to get some attention span that's a little bit longer than
just the communal aspect, the in-person communal ritualistic aspect of it. There's magic in it.
And this just popped into my head, but I got to witness this when we were living in San Francisco. I'm sure you're familiar with Carol Channing, the legendary Carol Channing.
Yeah, of course.
They were naming her high school's theater after her. And, she's in her 90s at this point and came to speak to this packed house of kids who were just eating up every word and asking really thoughtful questions. And it was like, okay, wow, this is something to see, because we're talking how many generations down the line. And here's Carol Channing saying, I started in, performing when I was in high school, and, look what happened to me, and you can do it. And it was so beautiful. I still get chills when I think about it. She was a fantastic person.
That sounds amazing. I've always been interested in the theater. I remember when my parents took me to the first play that I saw, which was Annie. Funny, orphan. Actually,
wow.
Annie, it's an orphan. Right. And I remember the play had to stop and the curtain dropped right in the middle of the play. And we had to evacuate the theater. There was a little fire backstage, but they kept us. They were saying the show will go on. Just please be patient if you can hang out, a little later with us. And this was in Kansas City. I was born, adopted, and raised in Kansas City. I think it was at the Midland. I'm trying to remember. We all came back into the theater and we took our seats, and, all the lights were on. And when the lights went dark, because the play was about to begin, everybody in the audience just erupted in applause.
Yeah.
And then the lights came back on and we were like, oh. And then they went out again. Everybody's like, yeah. And so they played with us that 4 or 5 times. And then the play started again and it finished. And it was so magical. And I can picture it in my head right now. That live aspect of anything can happen. And you're having this experience with all these people, for one night, because everything's different.
Yes.
And the audience is a character in and of itself. And that energy affects the way the story is told, certainly from night to night. And then I saw my grade school put on the play Oliver. So, of course, both plays deal with orphans, that I saw. And the kid playing Oliver, I just remember looking at him going, I want to do that. I think I can do that. And I was very young. And I begged my mom for acting classes. And she's like, no, you don't need to do that, you know. And I was an athlete too, so I was playing all the sports. But I had to beg her for 3 or 4 years to finally get an acting class. And the only reason was because I was in the Cub Scouts and we went to do a workshop with Theater for Young America there in Kansas City. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. And this was like in the 6th, 7th grade. And I just begged my mom once again, can I stay? Can I take these classes? And the teacher actually recommended me, said, no, I think your son should do this. And my mom caved in, let me do it, and loved the class. And a few weeks into the class, they were having auditions for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And they were casting, you know, children for the children. And I auditioned. I'm trying to remember if I even told my mom, because it just happened after class. Yeah. And I got the role of Mike TV. And I was hooked, man. I was hooked.
That's so cool.
Wow. So just changing gears.
But my adopted family didn't know. They didn't know anything about the theater world.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't know. And so it was just so foreign to her.
Yeah.
And I think finally she caved in.
Brian, how old were you when you found out you were adopted?
Don't remember a time. My parents were always open about it.
I'm so glad that is your experience. I think I have been so surprised at the number of people that we've spoken to on this podcast who just didn't have that. I am so thankful that it was never stigmatized in my home, in my community. My parents were so upfront about it, you know, with everyone. It's funny. Now I kind of admire it, A, because it was the right thing to do and lots of people didn't do it. But B, that took, when I was born 100 years ago, that was a bigger deal, you know, I think. Or maybe not. Maybe it's the same now. But in general, I just feel like there could have been stigma, but there wasn't.
My love for Kendall's parents, who I never got to meet, grows every day when I hear more about them. But just because they were so progressive in, you know, 1970, to have this thought that, you know, what we don't want to create a family secret. And then even further down the line, when Kendall's mother was terminally ill, like they didn't shy him away from reality, what was happening. So there were no, you know, secrets in the house. And I think that's important.
When I hear those stories of late discovery adoptees and people just lying around the subject, you know, all these secrets and lies. And it's, if you want to parent a child, parent that child. And be honest and respect who they are and where they come from. Kendall, I believe your mom had a couple miscarriages, if I remember correctly. Is that
before?
Yeah, same with my mom. Yeah, same with my mom. And that's a loss. You know, it's a loss that we should recognize for adoptive parents. But if they choose to adopt and bring another child from a different tribe into their tribe, they should work through that loss, you know, and sit with that loss and admit, okay, we're going to bring a child from a different tribe into our family and we will honor where they came from. I think it's highly important, you know. And adoptive parents, if I could defend them a little, is they were just not educated. They were literally told this child won't remember anything, you know, about their mother and about the past. Just move on as if they were your child, you know. And then these interracial and international adoptees who, you know, their parents saying, oh, we don't see color. You're our child just like all of us. But meanwhile, they're denying their very special, unique traits and their unique culture. And, you know, the secrets and lies, I can't believe we're still dealing with it today, actually. You know, I guess, okay, in the 50s, they were, you know, that was terrible back then. But now, I don't know, I think we're more educated. And, well, you know, it stems from shame. So if you're holding a secret about me, there must be something wrong with me. You know, that's what I naturally feel.
Yeah.
What exactly is the shame that you're dealing with? And
well, and think about the anxiety that's been created
thankfully
for so many people who since the advent of the home DNA kit, it's just like a ticking time bomb. Like, oh gosh, when are they going to,
No more secrets, everybody.
Right.
The skeletons are coming out of the closet.
Yeah.
So just be honest. And I don't understand why. I mean, get over it.
Exactly.
Listen, I mean, in the West, we have a very suppressed, terrible relationship with sex. And it's like, why? Let's talk about it. Let's be honest. What are you ashamed of? Let's talk about it. Let's be honest with issues around sex. And our issues stem from shame. Why should we be shameful about our bodies? Why should we be shameful about sex? Listen, there are 8 billion people on this planet. If there's one thing that we do, we fuck.
Exactly.
I mean, all of us.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You know, and we all have the same body parts. Why do we, what is it that you're holding and that you have to have a secret so much? We put so much stuff on this, on ourselves in society. Mm-hmm. Let's help each other out. Yeah. Let's talk to each other. Let's communicate and take care of each other.
Because, you bring up a good point, because my poor birth mother, we've never spoken, and I wish that could let go, because I think, like you said, she was only 15 when I was born. So there was the stigma of having a child that young, but she had zero control over whether she got to keep me. So to your point, it's like, that was 53 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, when is it okay to let go of that?
I know. And I'm so sorry, Kendall, that you're facing a second rejection in a way. And yes, it's like, women were not treated well if they came home pregnant, and lack of choice, lack of ownership of their own choice over their own bodies and what to do. And it was highly stigmatized and highly traumatic. My mother, they wanted to send her away. You're pregnant. She grew up in an Italian Catholic family. They wanted to send her away. And she wanted to keep me even though she was 16, but her parents were saying no. So my mom said, okay, if you let me stay at home while I'm pregnant, I promise I'll surrender my child to adoption. And me hearing that, I was like, wait, you wanted to keep me? Like, you had this hardship? I didn't know. I always had these fantasies that adoption, your mother made the best choice for you because she loved you. But meanwhile, in the back of my head going, but she made the best choice and that was giving me away? What is this, But I had all these things. Oh, she was probably young, couldn't take care of me, or she, they had these issues. What a great thing. And so to hear her and see her just sob when she saw me and she couldn't let go of me, I didn't know how to receive that love, and to receive her shame and stigma that she faced because it was all coming out again, It's just really hard for mothers, but I think this is a way to heal. I'm sorry that she's going through a tough time, and unfortunately,
because I have always, maybe to a fault, I've always been so proud, of myself. I don't mean in a conceited way. I just mean I lived through a lot. I'd buried both of my adoptive parents by the time I was 17. It built a lot of fortitude in me, and I have always taken a lot of pride in that. And I was surprised at myself with how much hurt I felt when my birth mother wouldn't speak to me. At way back when Corey and I talked about the possibilities of finding people, I was completely delusional. I was like, well, if she doesn't ever want to talk to me, no big deal. I had great parents, before. And that's easy to say until it slaps you in the face. And then it's,
I know,
what the hell? It's like,
what is this feeling?
Exactly. No offense. My mother has 4 kids. I would say that she's proud of all 4. I mean, of the 3 of the others, but I haven't done some of the things that 2 of them have done. You know what I mean? We all make bad life choices, don't get me wrong. And I've made a few, but it's just kind of shocking. I still feel that pride. Well, screw you, lady. I'm a nice guy and I'm successful, and I feel proud of myself and what I do and what I give back to the community. And she should feel that about me as well. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're proud of yourself. And you're like, look at me, Mom. Look at me. Just look at me once. Just respond to me once and tell me that you're proud of me. just once, and then we never have to talk again, but just acknowledge me, please.
Because I don't need anything from her. And in fact, after 6 years, I'm so aggravated that she hasn't spoken to me that I get myself like, I don't need her. Is that a facade? Probably. Because if she called me tomorrow and said, I'm sorry it's taken me so long for us to connect, my heart would melt and I would be open to a relationship. But I don't think that's what she wants. And I vacillate between those feelings constantly. Corey's probably sick of hearing me talk about it, you know?
Oh, but he's such a great partner, such a great partner. Of course, we go through those emotions. Mm-hmm. Trying to, first of all your emotions are, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's okay to feel that way. You have every right to feel all of that. We also do have to resign to some things, which is highly understandable, Kendall.
I'm sure you do. It's something that thankfully people who aren't adoptees or don't go through this transition, they don't have to think about, but it's so difficult.
So I met my mother when I went to California Institute of the Arts and for graduate school in their acting program. And I received a letter from my birth mother while I was in an acting class. We had our break. You know, it's like one of those 3-4 hour acting labs, and we had a break and I went to check the mail and there was the letter. I knew it because I saw her name. And I immediately just started sobbing. Yeah. What? I don't even know this woman. What am I feeling? And, you know, so my friends comforted me and I told the teacher. And of course, my acting teacher is like, well, we can use this if you want to read the letter with us. This is great. This is a moment. Let's live. I'm like, I think I'm going to go be alone. And so I went outside and there's this kind of sloped a little hill with these trees, and I sat on the dirt and I read this letter, and I think it took me about an hour to get through, you know, a 4-page letter, and just keep putting it down and crying. And I was like, what am I feeling? What is this? These emotions are ineffable, and it's so hard to describe. And for 24 hours, I was dating my wife, and she drove up, bless her heart, to stay the night with me at school in our tiny little closet of a dorm room. You know, I could be fine having dinner with my wife. Then all of a sudden I started crying. Yep. It was so overwhelming and I didn't know why. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, when they say, you know, when you reunite and the birth mother sees you for the first time, she goes back to that time of relinquishment. Mm-hmm. So when my mother saw me, she was a 16-year-old again, you know, and all those emotions come up of the whole time period. I'm sure the emotions that came up for me was like cellular memory. I was that infant being taken away from his mother, you know, the infant that was not put immediately into my mother's arms. And those emotions just come up. And of course, and we didn't have language to describe those emotions back then. And that's why it's just overwhelming and coming up, and we don't know what it is, what it was. You know?
When you got that letter, had you been looking for your birth family?
Yeah, so my whole life. Yeah, I'm one of the fortunate ones like you, Kendall. I love my adoptive family. I certainly had a very complicated relationship with my mother, but I never doubted her love, and she would do anything for me. You know, my brother and sister, who are biologically related to my adoptive parents. Okay. So after those miscarriages that my mother had, they adopted me, and then my sister pops out, and then my brother. Wow. So I grew up with two people who were related to the parents. But I had always asked about my mother, my birth mother. And even my adoptive mom said, you'd always asked about her, you know, and I was always told, well, we don't have the information right now, blah, blah, blah. Well, I came home for the holidays going into the year of 1998. I was in our kitchen, and my mom broached the subject, and she said, well, I have some information. And she whips out my original birth certificate. Listeners, the crazy thing, I don't know if you all know, but there are still states where records are closed to adoptees, right? We are not allowed to have our original birth certificate. So we get an amended birth certificate with the adoptive parents' information on it. Not really a record of our birth, but more of a record of our adoption. Kansas City is interesting because it sits on the border of Missouri and Kansas. Kansas has always had open records. They've never closed their records. Missouri was very closed. I was born on the Missouri side. So there was some angel in Catholic Charities, I was adopted through Catholic Charities, who photocopied my birth certificate from my mom. I don't know. She was never forthright with that. But nonetheless, my birth mother's name was on it. We looked her up, and she had other information, like she had done some stalking, I guess, but knew that she was married and had her husband's name. And she's like, well, let's just look her up in the phone book. Looks it up in the phone book, and boom, they're right there. Both their names with that last name right there in the phone book.
And you can use it to interrogate somebody and, not inflict bruises.
Yes. Right? That's right. And we get it every year under the mailbox. Anyway, it was so sudden, and my whole life I knew that I wanted to meet my mother. I always had the feeling that I would definitely know my mother. But suddenly there was a little fear, and there was some guilt because I didn't want to make my adoptive mother feel bad, my loyalty, that adoptive guilt. So I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I'm having these feelings come up. I know I want to meet her, so I had to deal with that. But then I finally said, yeah, I'd like to meet her. And my adoptive mom said, okay, I'll call her and let her know that you are who you are, and I'll make sure it's her. Let her know who you are and that you want to contact. And if she feels the same way. My birth mother was elated. She even looked for me when I was younger, carried so much guilt and shame for relinquishing me. She said, yes, should I call him? What should I do? And my adoptive mom just said, how about we just start with a letter? So this is back in 1998, and I got that letter. She started out the letter right away. Brian, I first want to answer a question that I'm sure you have for me, and one that I put to myself 23 years ago. How could I give away my own son? She said, Brian, I was 16. I was at a high school party and had been gang raped.
Oh.
And that floored me because the whole identity thing, right? And it was frightening. It was the last thing I expected to hear. So had to deal with that. And I'll put a button on that, you guys. That was a tough journey, obviously, but after work and talking with people, I pretty quickly was able to realize that I am not the rape. I know the cause of it. It's a horrible thing that my mother went through, but I am not that. I wrote her back, and then we started writing each other, and then we started emailing, and it just became this beautiful honeymoon of a relationship. Just asking all these questions about each other. And then we met in person. I went and I had to go home for my brother's high school graduation, and we met. I went to her house and we met. And that's when she was like, she couldn't stop crying and was holding me. And I didn't know how to take that. I didn't know how to receive it. Yeah. I was very overwhelmed. As much as, I was saying, I felt like I had to take care of her. I felt like I was the adult in the relationship almost. That's me too. I'm always like, peace. Yep. Let's make sure everything's okay. We're all, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm fine. I'm doing fine. But yet I have these emotions inside me bubbling that I didn't understand. Yeah. Not until I started performing my play Blank, which literally refers to the namespace on my original birth certificate. It was blank, a blank space. And of course, it's that hole that we're trying to fill, Kendall. It's, just trying to find things out. After I started performing, I got into this big adoption community, that you guys have been introduced to through doing your podcast. That's when I really started to learn and understand what my adoption has meant to me. And talking with mothers, with first mothers. And I'm like, oh, that's why my mom didn't want to let go of me. She wanted to touch me and hold me and not let go of me again. And I didn't understand that. And I didn't understand the hardship. I just thought it was such an easy choice for mothers, right? Oh yeah, adoption, a great thing. I can't take care of my kid right now. But it was very difficult for my mother, and obviously Kendall, and it was for yours too, I'm sure.
Yeah, it must have been.
But I learned a lot through this community about myself and about the play I wrote. I mean, I wrote this play and I didn't fully, a lot of it came out of my subconscious. I didn't fully get, lines that I wrote suddenly started making sense to me. Oh, that's why I wrote that line. I would hold Q&As with the audience. And so my play, I probably didn't fully understand my own play fully embrace it as an actor and as a human being until after 30 performances.
Wow.
So I just learned so much about myself. And that's a great thing about theater and art. It's therapeutic, not only for others, but your own evolution.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. We want to talk about the origins of blank here in a moment, but just to clarify for you, Brian, and for those listening, that Kendall and I decided a handful of episodes in that we only want to know so much about who we're talking to get us in trouble. Because if we know everything, or if we do a pre-interview, it just doesn't come across as real, so we obviously don't know everything that happens in blank, hence the gay gasp that you heard from me. But I feel like it serves us well because it's not only for us, but for the guests. We don't know the full story. We know the skeleton of the story, but getting to hear about the organs and the skin and the muscles and all that stuff, I think is what helps make this podcast real, as opposed to doing a pre-interview with a talk show producer or something like that. So, I think early on, I did a pre-interview with a pair of sisters, beautiful story, but then that pre-interview, which I didn't record, turned out to be not as good as the actual interview because I knew everything.
Yeah.
So it was like, I could guide them through it, but then they'd already told me too. So they're telling me a second time.
Yeah. It just sounds weird.
In an organic conversation. I actually prefer this. So Corey and listeners, get ready for some more gay guys.
Okay. There you go.
Yes, wonderful. Okay. All right. So you're still in school. You meet your birth mother. All these feelings are like churning around inside of you. At what point do you start to think about putting pen to paper and telling a story?
I saw a good friend of mine who's actually a professional writer right now, a screenwriter. She put on a solo performance, and it was about her first experience on a set as an actor. And she played a nude corpse.
Oh, my.
And, the play starts out with her laying in a bathtub, just like this. Then you hear rehearsals up, blah, blah, blah. And then she gets up and starts telling her story. It's really about, owning your body, overcoming self-conscious issues and body issues and image issues, especially for women, and the way that sometimes they're portrayed in some of these films and TV. So it was really her coming into herself. And at the very end, it said, okay, pictures up, places please. And then she removes her towel and lies in the bathtub. And it was the most powerful, beautiful thing I had ever seen up to that point. And I went up to her, I'm like, that was beautiful. How do you come up with this? I want to do this. You're so brave. So that was my inspiration. I wanted to write something. And then I saw a woman named Allison Larkin put on a play out here in Los Angeles. And it was about her adoption story. And I was like, well, here you go. This is what I got to do. So she was inspirational too. So I started writing, you guys, and I don't fancy myself as a writer. I'm an actor, but if ideas, I guess, I don't know. There's a writer in all of us, I guess. But I was writing things down and I wanted to do a journey in search of identity. And that's what I wanted to do. And I had this script and I gave it to a friend of mine who worked at like Warner Brothers at the time, I think, and revising screenplays. And I said, can you check this out? Does it make sense? And I had written this, all these questions about identity and created scenes with kind of my adoption story in the background, right? And he said, Brian, like, your scenes are fine. Like, they're intellectually stimulating, kind of ethereal. Okay, but Brian, your story, your adoption story, that's the heart of it. I didn't know all this about you. I am so intrigued. You need to go with that. And then these other questions come out of that. And I'm like, oh, I guess adoption does have something to do with all my identity issues, So I was exploring that and I came up with the play Blank. And I kind of made it a goal for myself to just put it up, just do it. If it sucks, if it fails, just do it. And I premiered it in April 17th, I think was the premiere date in 2010. And I performed it for a decade, traveling the United States. I was very fortunate with the critics. I was very fortunate with a few awards. And I also, along with theater festivals and performing at other theaters all over the country and in Vancouver, I also performed for the foster adoption community at conferences and stuff like that. That's when I started. The first time I performed at a conference, it was the Concerned United Birth Parents Conference. First time I had ever been to an adoption conference. What is this? They actually have support groups for adoptees and stuff. I was like, well, I'll go check out the conference too. And then I know I perform later that night. So the first panel I sat in on, Nancy Verdier was speaking, who wrote The Primal Wound. Never heard that term. And she's an adoptive parent, you know. And she wrote this book, The Primal Wound, and was saying these things about adoptees and about identity issues and kind of the chameleon adoptee who is able to go into a room, size it up and say, okay, this is who I need to be at this point. Because, you know, we wear all these masks because we're trying to fit into a family that is not naturally our tribe. And she was saying all these things and the room started spinning. And I was like, oh my, what is happening here? And this little woman next to me, very young birth mother, she kind of put her hand on my shoulder. So, is all this hitting home? Are you okay? And I was like, she's talking about me. Oh my God. But I remember performing in front of them and being in the room where, 100 plus people are all directly connected to adoption. And that was a turning point of the play. I felt that energy and I performed it like I hadn't performed it before. I had already done a couple theater festivals here in LA. And my original run was in Hollywood 4 weeks. And to be in that room, it was like a whole new play. And then the Q&A after and people saying things, I was like, oh, this is why I wrote that line. This is why I wrote the play. And I was very fortunate to continue performing it for 10 years. And the last play that I did, the last time I did it was February of 2020 in Northampton, Massachusetts. And then COVID hit.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah. I know. That show. Well, could we have? I mean, things were starting to happen. Things were starting to happen,
yes.
Yeah.
Brian, was it that performance that you just described? Was that when you realized you weren't just doing this for yourself as a playwright and a performer, but you were doing it for the community as well?
I knew that at that point, the play took on a life of its own. It became something else. I did have moments like for my LA run with, people would come up to me after, and I had 2 mothers for my LA run, let alone other places, tell me. And I was the first one they told that they relinquished a child.
Oh, wow.
So they had carried that shame. And then something in the play brought it out to where they felt okay to talk about it. And this is the importance of art, right? When you guys do this podcast and you're putting voices out there along with your own, it helps other people feel that they're not alone. It's okay to feel these things. We don't need to be, we're not perfect. We wouldn't know happiness if we never experienced sadness and despair. It's okay. You're not alone. We all feel these things. And we're holding a mirror up to nature and releasing our voices, and it can only be healing for the community.
Oh, did your mother see the show?
She did. Both mothers saw the show.
Yeah.
One time, and I do my whole family. I do my mother, my father, my grandparents on both sides. And my whole adoptive family was there. And my brother and sister were dying throughout the whole thing. And I have this whole, my adoptive mother is a big part of it. She was a smoker, and I just, my physicality was always her smoking. She just chain smoked the whole time. And my mother saw the show, and after the show, she was outside smoking. And a gentleman came up to her and said, your son nailed you.
Oh, wow. It didn't even
he saw the exact physicality.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it.
But my birth mother saw it. I was so nervous. I'd never been that nervous before in my life. She brought her husband, and we had known, this was in 2010, so we'd known each other for 12 years. And when I told her at first that I was doing the play, I sent her information, and she was like, oh my God, what did I do to you? You have a blank face. My image is like a blank face of my body. So she was kind of frightened to see it too. Oh. Anyway, I was backstage in the dressing room, and I called my stage manager over, and I had this little thing of Kleenexes, and I said, hey, there's a woman and her husband sitting in the back, in the corner, house left. Can you give her these Kleenexes? She's like, absolutely. So she goes, and I'm in my dressing room. I hear a knock at the door, and my stage manager comes in, and she says, she already has her own box. I gave it back. She loved it. Afterwards, I use an alias, and I keep her private because she still carries a lot of stigma and shame. And our relationship is a little more complicated now. But that night afterwards, I had introduced her to a few friends, but not as my mother. I was going to let her do that. She introduced herself and said, "I'm Beth." And Beth was the name that I used for my birth mother in the play. And that was huge for her. And for me, it was like, oh, it felt so great.
Acknowledgement.
But I did a run in Kansas City, and it was fabulous to be in Kansas City. But it got a lot of publicity. You know, I was on NPR there, and I was on front page of Kansas City Star, and that freaked out my biological family. So my birth mother kind of went into protector mode, and none of them saw the play. And I was so hurt. I was devastated. I mean, I feel I'm honoring my mother in that. Both my mothers in the play. I guess I didn't like the publicity, but from that point on, my birth mother kind of just put the ball in my court continuously. And there were some of the things that I said because of me not understanding my emotions to her. She felt I was pushing her away. You know, we adoptees have this, come here, I want you. Oh, wait, stand there. Come here, I want you. Stand there. And that's kind of how it was. And she saw it as me pushing her away. And she didn't want to lose me again. She didn't want to feel like she's just going to lose me again. So she has had me kind of make all the decisions, me making the phone calls, me planning to see her, me. And I asked her why. And she told me that. She said, I just want to, you said things to me like I have my family. I don't need to call you, I don't need my kids to call you grandma or whatever. I don't know. There were these things that she was saying very early on where I was like, oh, wait, how do I deal with that? But it seemed like I was pushing her away. And so, I mean, we still have a relationship. When I call her, we have a great talk. When I go to Kansas City, we try to see her. I have 2 daughters. They call her Grandma Ann, Grandma Beth.
We'll take it. Yeah, don't worry about it.
When my daughters go see her, they call her Grandma Beth. I'll use the alias. But she just won't call me, and that's kind of exhausting having the ball in your court the whole time, But I would like her to call me on my birthday.
Right.
Mom, if you're listening, you can call me on my birthday.
Exactly.
So, and then my relationship with my adoptive mom changed too because she suddenly became defensive, even though she was instrumental in finding my birth mother. My birth mother came out and visited me in Los Angeles in the summer of 98. And my adoptive mother was like, what? What are you doing? I'm like, well, we're getting to know each other. Why? I'm like, Mom, you're the one who helped connect us. Oh, I just thought you wanted, medical information and just, that's it. And then that's it. You move on. Why do you need a relationship with it? So it became very defensive for many years. And I invited my birth mother to our wedding, my wife and I's wedding, which my adoptive mother was like, why are you doing this? You don't even know her. And I'm like, well, that's why.
Exactly.
I'd like to get to know her, and she's my mother. So it was that for a year. And finally, you guys, I just called my adoptive mom, and I said, Mom, I'm exhausted. I cannot walk on eggshells anymore around this topic with you. I need you to be my mother and support me in this. This is where I need you most as a parent. Support me. Yep. Because whether you like it or not, I want a relationship with my birth mother. And I want my kids to have a relationship with my birth mother. And if you don't like that and you don't support me, I'm hurt, but I'm still going to do it. But I would really love to have your motherly love and support on this. And she cried, and that was a great conversation. But it's hard for us to do, Kendall, because we feel so guilty. We don't want to ruffle any feathers again. We don't want to, for our adoptive family, we don't want to, I'm not looking for another family,
Yeah. Yeah, you're always having to explain yourself, I think. But yeah, my story's a little bit different just because my adoptive parents were already gone. I knew that they were supportive of my search, but, I didn't live through. I don't know if it really would have gone that way if they were living. My adoptive father's second wife was very supportive. She knew how much I wanted to find. In fact, before we did the DNA test, there was a rumor around my hometown that they might have thought they knew who my birth mother was, which was just all bogus. But my stepmother was instrumental in trying to help me find that woman. And I did find her, and then suddenly found out that she was not my birth mother. But it's so interesting because I did really have all that support behind the scenes. I've always been, I said I had a lot of fortitude that I think my living through a lot brought to me, but sometimes I could be like the bull in the china shop. Stand back. This is my story. You sit down and shut up, and
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I want to do. I can definitely be that way sometimes.
Yeah.
Corey will attest. It probably comes from self-preservation, but part of it just has to be part of your personality as well.
So, Brian, I think I heard you correctly refer to your adoptive mother in the past tense.
Oh, yes. We lost her in 2020, not of COVID, but of other health issues. And
And how was your relationship when she passed?
it was the same. It had its ups and downs. I don't feel like I left anything unsaid, but yeah, we'd blow up at each other a lot. And we did blow up probably a few months before that happened, before she passed, but we had a phone call about it.
Good.
It was a complicated relationship, but we also had a great time. I'm not, I don't mean to say that, it was she was a fine mom, but we did. It was just complicated.
Sure.
That's all. I poked her a lot. I poked her. I was like, you still love me? You love me now? You love me? You still love me? You still love me? Are you going to let me go too? Are you going to get rid of me? Yeah. So I did that. And there were things that she didn't understand. She never really was on board with the whole theater thing. She came out and visited me out here while I was at Cal Arts. And she said to me, Brian, I'll admit, I always just had hoped it was a hobby, that it was just going to be a hobby. And she said, we just don't know anything about this field and we have no idea how to help. And that's it. That's the thing. I'm like, you could have told me this when I was 13, instead of have this come out in other ways, in other controlling ways. But it was very beautiful and very human. And, our parents do the best they can. And she wanted the best for me and was trying to push me down this other way. But she literally admitted, and it was beautiful to hear.
It's cathartic.
She didn't know how to.
Did your birth mother have any other children?
Yeah, 2 boys. One of them's name is Brian.
Interesting.
She had no idea that my name was Brian. That synchronicity pops up a lot in the adoption world. I met them back then. We don't really have an ongoing relationship. We're just in 2 completely different worlds. I've met them and talked to them. We just don't keep up. I'd love to. I get updates from her and stuff. But on my father's side, though, I did find my father.
That was my next. That was my next question. Wow.
Oh,
I mean, it's from what you've shared with us, the one thing that we know about him right now. I got to hear a little bit more.
So my mom when she saw me, she thought she knew who the father was. She said there were 3 boys, but could only remember 2 names. And for the incident at the party. But she said I look a lot like this one guy who happens to be in federal prison for drug trafficking.
Oh, wow.
And that's fine. He's probably dangerous, but if you want my help, I can help you and give you any information that I know and stuff like that. She showed me his picture in the yearbook. But I was like, no. So while I was performing Blank, so this is 12 years later, and I was learning what adoption really means to me, I was like, you know what? The truth of this is important. I need to seek out my paternal side, my biological paternal side. I'm going to do it. This is a long story, and my film at Ghost Kingdom is all about this journey. I wrote another play called At Ghost Kingdom with the symbol at, that takes a magnifying glass to the search for biological relatives. And it was originally a play, and I was slated to do an off-Broadway performance in October of 2020. And we all know that COVID. So I knew that if I put that script on the shelf, I wouldn't go back to it. It takes so much energy. And while I was already in rehearsals with my director, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to film this. I'll make it more intimate. I'm not going to film it on a stage, but I'll film it in my apartment and just kind of make it a little more camera friendly, but keep the theatricality, the theatrical language of it. Just less physical or more close up. So, but keep it simple. So I did. And that's what At Ghost Kingdom was. And the past few years, I've, gone to conferences and had screenings. I got into a few film festivals and stuff like that. Side note, the Ghost Kingdom, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term. B.J. Lifton, who wrote the book Lost and Found, The Adoption Experience, and Journey of the Adopted Self, which is one of my favorite books about adoption, she coined the term the ghost kingdom, which is the spectral place in the psyche that we all go to with our fantasies about who our mother is and who our father is and who we would have been if we were with them. We have all these ghosts. And of course, the mothers had the fantasies of their ghost children. And that really resonated with me because, man, I lived in a fantasy world, I tell you. Wish my perfect biological movie star of a mother would come save me. Or, if I was ever angry, she's probably just some druggy, trailer trash, blah, blah, blah. And when we decide to search, we literally step into the ghost kingdom and humanize those ghosts. It's us trying to meet our infant selves and humanize that part of us. Anyway, so that's where the ghost kingdom comes from. So I went journey. I was looking for this guy. I made a relationship with his daughter who helped put us in touch. I talked to this guy who was in federal prison. He didn't say it was rape, but he certainly said that night happened. I'll go to bat for my mom and any woman, anytime. That's between my mother and them. We finally got a test or a way to do a test. They wouldn't let me send a swab into prison. I called the DNA company and they said, if he can send you fingernails, and if we're able to scrape enough DNA off the nails, we can compare it with your cheek swab. And I was like, fingernail? Do you want hair too? And they're like, actually, you'd have to get a lot of hair to get the samples that we need. So it was fingernails. So I emailed him and he said, fingernails? How about blood on a diabetic stick? And I was like, blood on a diabetic stick? They won't let me send you a Q-tip? Like, they'll let you send me blood on I don't understand. But I called the DNA. They said, no, there won't be enough blood. Just if you can get the fingernails. So he said, I'll send you both. Fingernails and blood on a diabetic stick.
Oh my God.
So I got it, sent it in. He's not my father.
Oh.
He's not my father. So the guy that I look like and was kind of the ringer of this incident is not my father. And I was talking with that family. Most of the family didn't want to have anything to do with me because I had publicity about blank. And they're like, he's saying you're a rapist and stuff. It was horrible.
Yeah, right.
It was horrible and so hard. But his daughter was so lovely and embraced me and took me in and, was so helpful. And I developed this year and a half long, almost 2 years long relationship with her. And now she's become a ghost.
Yeah.
So I told my mom, I was like, Mom, he's not my dad. And she's like, oh, well, I don't think you're the other guy, because he was like this really big guy with a huge head and he was a police officer. You just don't look anything like him, but I guess you could be his. But I did end up dating someone about a month after the event, and we all thought you were his because that's who I was dating, and I became pregnant at that time. That's when I found out I was pregnant. So let me put you in touch with this guy. And I was like, okay, but does the timing work out? And she said, I don't think it does, because as your due date became more clear, that's when I realized it was probably from the incident at school, the rape. And I was like, okay, listen, I'll go down any path. Let's do this. And so she puts me in touch with this guy. He always thought I was his son. He's like, I've been waiting for this phone call. I've been waiting to hear from you for, this was back in 2016, wow. However old I was. I've been waiting for, 42 years, whatever. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, her family took me into a church. They were all Catholic Italians. They took me into this church and made me sign you away and relinquish any rights to you, and made me promise I would not pursue Beth anymore. And he said, but in the meantime, I told my wife before I married her that I have a son out there. I told my 2 daughters that I have a son out there. So I was this guy's ghost for 40 some odd years. And he said, I didn't know about the rape, but I sure do hope you're mine. Oh. I hope you're my son. I mean, we've all been waiting for you. And we get together with these big family dinners all the time. And I tell you, you have a space at our dinner table anytime you want. And I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And we did the test. The timing didn't work out. It was after. So I had to call this guy and break his heart. Something that he has been holding on to for all these years.
Thinking, that it was real.
And tell him I'm not his son. And then I pursued the other guy who was the big police officer, who, by the way, my mother was at a Little League baseball game, my birth mother, and she was going to the bathroom and she heard someone calling her name. And she looked over and it was the police officer, and he was in the squad car, and he was one of the boys that night. And she, frightened, tightened up. And he said, I just want to apologize for what happened back in high school. I just want to apologize for that. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty amazing. My mother told me that. Anyway, his family didn't want anything to do with me. I talked to who would have been my half brother, who would have been my half sister, blah, blah, blah. And I really kind of had to put it to bed, you guys. I was so exhausted. I had been searching really hardcore for 6 straight years and just having these really difficult conversations with, possible family members. And I had to bury it. I had to come to terms, like Kendall, like you are with your mother. We find these ways to come to terms with moving on and not knowing certain information. And I said, you know what I'll do? I'll put a bunch of information on Ancestry.com, 23andMe, Family Tree, DNA, all those things. And if anything pops up, fine. I am a father now, and I need to be a father. All this stuff. I just had to come to terms with it. Anyway, to make a very long, complicated DNA story short, met an angel who was related to me, came up as first cousin, and we were trying to figure out how we were related, try to find this Kansas City connection. His name is John, and he said, Brian, his wife was the one that was helping me, actually, who I wasn't related to, but I was related to her husband, John. And I'm like, Brian, we think you may be John's nephew, and here's why. John's father, who we think could be your grandfather, moved the kids to Sedalia, Missouri, which is right outside of Kansas City, and worked for the Ford Edsel Company in the 50s. He had an affair with a woman, another married woman, who also worked for the Ford Edsel Company. She became pregnant. John's father, who would be my grandfather, came clean to his wife, saying, I had an affair, she's pregnant. His wife said, well, I'm moving back to Illinois with my family. You can either come back with your family and be with your 4 children, or you could be with this other woman who's married and is carrying your child. Your choice. And of course, he skipped out back to Illinois to be with his family. And I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to find this guy. Like, he was probably given up for adoption. Like, he's, product of an affair. Right. I kept looking, but they sent me a picture of who would be my grandfather. Looks just like me. I mean, sent me 2 photos, and I look just like him. Like, my wife was like, oh, this is your biological family. Yeah. This is your father's side of family, without a doubt. So they gave me a name, but some of the letters were wrong, so I was going down all these rabbit holes. Some of these names started popping up on 23andMe, and I'm like, who are these names? And I was in touch with another person on 23andMe. We were like second cousins. And I said, you're connected to these guys. Who are these people? And they said, oh, yeah, this woman actually, I think, is from Kansas City. That may be the connection. You're definitely connected to me on your father's side, so this may be it. So I looked up these names and I followed them on Facebook, and I got this woman's name. The year matches up. She had passed. And she had 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. I was trying to see if she gave anyone away for adoption or anything like that. And so I connected them all. All 4 of those children are on Facebook. So I send them messages. But they are the older generation. And if you're not connected through with Facebook, sometimes you just don't get those messages, or they don't know how to get the messages. The son had an email, a business email. So I was like, fuck it, I'll send it, I'll send the exact same message on that email. He responded the next day. And he said, I'm happy to help you any way I can. I know some of these DNA stories can be a little confusing and lead us in wrong directions, but I'm happy to help you anyway. Why don't we just start with your mother's name and where she was from, any information that you can give me? And I said, my mother's name is this. She went to this high school. I was conceived May of 1974, born February 4th, 1975. There you go. He emailed back and he said, I knew your mother. I went to high school with her. We went on a date. a double date, late April, early May of 1974. I'm happy to do a DNA test, whatever you need.
Wow.
And I fell out of my chair. I knew it. I didn't even need the test. Like I knew it. I was like, oh, this was 10 years of hardcore searching. And of course, even longer dealing with this rape thing in my head. This guy has nothing to do with the rape at all. Nothing to do with it. So for 24, 25 years, I had thought I was a product of rape. And, I was talking with groups and emotionally processing. I asked him, I said, Rick, he's very open. In fact, if you guys want to, we can come back, the two of us, and do an interview.
Oh, that'd be cool.
If you want. Later on, he's very open. I said, Rick, do you mind if when I get the results, if I call you in person, and go beyond email? And he said, absolutely. He said, and just so you know, I've been sharing everything with my wife. And I was like, oh, thank God, I'm not a secret. And I was like, I'm thrilled. And he said, listen, I know it sounds like you've been through the ringer here. If it turns out I'm not your father, I'm happy to be a sounding board for you. But if I am, we have a lot to talk about. And came in 99.9999999%. And I said, you're my dad. And he said, well, I love you and I'm proud of you.
Oh.
That's amazing.
And it's so beautiful to hear. That's all. Yeah. He could have hung up after that. I was fine. But it was just all those emotions of dealing with it, It was just such a beautiful moment. And we have a relationship now. He came out to visit. He stays in touch with my daughters, texts them all the time. I went and stayed at their house. I have a half sister through him who is involved in the theater.
Very cool.
And his mom, who was my grandma, was on track to be a professional singer and then got tuberculosis. Oh. So performance is that. My half sister lives in New York, Manhattan, and my half brother lives in Houston, along with my father. My father lives in Houston too. He was a Division I athlete, baseball. And my father was a Division I athlete, Jayhawk, for tennis. Wow. And my daughter is a Division I athlete for volleyball. So all that all this stuff was just coming out. And Rick accompanied me for the conference last year, the first Untangling Our Roots conference. Was Kendall, you're going this year? Is that what?
Yep.
Yay! We can meet in
I
person.
know.
Give you a big personal hug at the end. And he came and he's been learning so much about this world, because not only did he find out that he was a birth father, I was the one to reveal to him that he's also an NPE. Mm. He did not know that he was a product of an affair. I was kind of fishing when we were talking. Does he know? Because I called John and his wife, Sharon, who helped me find him, who gave me that information. I said, I found him. They're like, oh, they were elated. Like they've been looking for him. They knew they had a brother out there. Mm-hmm. So I connected them. And they live in Houston as well. So they live 30 minutes from. I know. So I told John, I said, John, he doesn't know about his father. And he goes, no, he has to know. He has to know. They brought him as an infant over to their house saying, you need to take care of your son or something like that. When you talk to my father, he can explain that better. But I said, he doesn't know. And I know. And I'm all about transparency in this world. I feel it my duty and responsibility to reveal this. You need to tell me everything you know about that story. Yep. And he said, okay, here it is. Rick and I had just had a Zoom conversation, and he said, great talking to you. And I'm happy to do it whenever on your time. I'm happy to do it whenever you want. And I said, well, why don't we do it tomorrow? And he said, okay. And so we did it. And I said, Rick, I have some information I feel it my duty to tell you. And I told him the whole Fort Edsel story and the affair. And I said, Rick, I think you are that boy who was born, that your mother was the woman who had the affair with him. And he said, okay, I don't really know what to do with that information. I said, you could do whatever you want. I just feel it my duty to tell you. If you want to confirm this and look it up, I'll go on that journey with you. I'll help you. I'm right here. I get it. If you want to sit with it, I'll be here for you too. It's huge info. He confirmed it, and he ended up doing a 23andMe DNA test, which doubly confirmed our relationship, but also that relationship. And my father is an NPE as well. So he found out within the span of just a couple of weeks that, all that.
Did your birth father know that your birth mother was even pregnant, or? Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes. He had heard at the time when she was actually dating that guy. So she thought I was her boyfriend, which later turned into, oh, maybe it came from that incident, the rape, because of my due date. But he called and said, hey, I hear you may be pregnant. Is it mine? Do you know? And she said, no, it's not yours. That's what he said.
Oh.
So I called my mom and I said, Ma, found my father. And she said, oh. And I said the name. And I don't know that name. And I said, do you want me to send you a picture?
Yeah.
This is it. And she said, no, I'll just go look at my yearbook. She can't recall it. She doesn't recall that night. And so here I am harboring a little anger and disappointment because I went down a hell of a fucking ride.
Yep.
But she was probably still going through trauma.
And I don't blame
at
her.
that time.
Absolutely. And I don't blame her at all.
Yeah.
No, I was just, my emotions initially came up. No. And I'm going to talk to that point, Corey. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Horrible time for her. Horrible time. Here's a woman who was violated and then was trying to also reclaim her sexuality, right? And pregnant in an Italian Catholic family.
Right.
All that. Horrible. Parents wanted to send her away.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't. So I get all that, but then I still have the feelings like, well, fuck. And I talked to a real close mother friend of mine, a birth mother, who has a daughter that I'm also friends with in the adoption community. And she was date raped. That was a date rape incident. So I was very close with her. And I said, I found my father. And she was elated. And I said, Beth doesn't remember. She doesn't remember. And she said, Brian, let me tell you something. She said, I was pregnant with my daughter, the date rape happened. I became pregnant. And that whole time period, I was pregnant when JFK was assassinated. And she said, you ask anybody, they know exactly where they were when they got that news. She said, Brian, I don't even recall him being shot.
Wow.
I have no recollection of any assassination. And she said that the trauma runs so deep. There's a lot of healing to do.
For sure. I mean, it's amazing and helpful when the body can do that, to protect you,
Right.
you.
Right. Yeah, it goes into protection mode, right? For that moment. But then how do we approach it later?
Exactly.
How do we approach that later?
It gets so suppressed.
And after the moment, how can we be better as a community to help people?
Remove the stigma.
Remove it, man. There's nothing to be ashamed of. These things happen.
Absolutely.
We could put our opinions on it. We could put religious dogma on it. We could put, social structures on it. We could put all this shit on it. But you know what? At the end of the day, this thing happened. Let's deal with it rather than hide it, rather than shame it, rather than suppress it.
Because it might have been that one day. You know what I mean? It can affect you for the rest of your life. I mean, when I think about these poor, especially mothers, who are dealing with the ongoing guilt and the ongoing torment, it's just sad. So.
No, it is. We're human beings just having experiences. And we're all in the same boat. We're all having experiences. And the more we talk about it, the more we understand each other, the more we can support each other, the more we can, embrace each other and embrace ourselves, embrace our own stories. There's nothing wrong with us. We're just having a human experience.
Exactly.
Life happens.
That's it.
Life
happens without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, Brian, thank you for mentioning the Untangling Our Roots conference.
Yes. Yeah, it's two organizations.
Yes.
National Association of Adoptees and Parents and the Right to Know. So they're coming together, adoptee constellation, as well as NPEs and donor conceived. It's fabulous umbrella.
So this will be the first time that Family Twist will be live at one of these events. I know it's going to be really healing for Kendall. It's going to be a lot because I think there's maybe 8 to 10 of our former guests are going to be there.
Great.
And it's so, I'm trying really hard to make it happen that I can be there too. We have 7 pets, and so pet care is a little challenging.
You have 7?
We have 5 tiny dogs.
Yes.
And 2 cats.
Two of them are with us right now. They're the podcast pups because they stay the quietest.
You guys.
Yes, we've got a dog sitter that comes over.
2 of our 3 cats. We have 3 cats. and 2 of them are running.
I saw one behind you.
Not close to
Yeah.
7.
But yeah, I really want to be there just because I want Kendall to be able
Roxy.
to experience it as much as possible, and then just be there to support him and meet people and things like that. But it's going to be a lot, to take in over just a few days.
It was great. So I screened at Ghost Kingdom there last year, and that was wonderful because also my birth father came, so I was able to introduce him. So at Ghost Kingdom, I wrote that before I found my father.
Yeah.
So it ends with me coming to terms, which is more realistic for a lot of people.
Sure.
But it ends with me coming to terms that I may never know my father, and how do I move forward with that? Spoiler alert.
Right.
I was, after that experience, I answered some questions, and then I said, so I want to introduce you all to someone. And I told him the quick story and introduced my father. So he came up and we fielded questions together. It was a beautiful moment. And I've known a few people who go to these conferences with their birth parents. I always loved it. And I learned so much from both of them, especially the mothers. I learned so much from the mothers. And now I'm that person with his father there. And, hopefully we can help people out that help me the same way. But he's still learning a lot too. Yeah. But Kendall, you're going to meet a lot of great brothers and sisters there. Yeah. It's just fantastic. Well, we're a good family. You just think something and you know exactly what they're going to say, or you're on the same page. We speak the same language.
I'm such an emotional person that Corey's, when I could use him there. Yeah. I'm so emotional in general. I can cry at the drop of a hat.
Kendall's half-sister, who we found on his birth mother's side, is doing a traveling nurse gig in Boston. And she said if she's available that weekend, she will come over and stay with the critters. So fingers crossed there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So just kind of, it's so funny that we're both able to be there because, Kendall's found family is taking care of our babies.
Exactly. And
fabulous.
It's been amazing to have her near anyway.
Yeah.
We live about 80 miles north of Boston. So it's been fantastic to get to spend time with her. And she came over and spent a weekend with us. And, so it's just, and she's a really great person. And, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's great you have her, right? And the relationship with your sister on your mother's side.
Do.
And your mother's sister. Yep. Yeah.
I think that's definitely great. Helped with some of the healing because it's like, while he doesn't have that with his birth mother, he and his sister are so ridiculously close and have so much in common, and they just glow when they're in the same room.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
beautiful.
She's fantastic.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And she's embraced me so well,
I mean, that's another journey too. The siblings, right? The half siblings. I do have a good relationship with my new half brother and half sister. We text each other, and I went to both of their weddings.
Oh, very cool.
That's awesome.
Like a year after I reunited. But that's a whole nother journey too. I assure everyone, on your time, we don't need to be best friends. I'd love to talk to you once, at least, just to say hi, but on your terms. They also just found out that their grandfather isn't their biological grandfather, and their grandmother, who they held on a pedestal, had an affair, but she's human. Yeah. She was going through a lot that time. So they have their own journey. And now the oldest sibling is no longer the oldest sibling. Yeah. There's all this stuff that, that anyone connected to adoption feels and goes through. Yeah. And it's just best to be open and honest and supportive. That's all.
Because Kendall definitely bulldozed his way to a couple situations.
That's kind of...
Good for you, Kendall.
I didn't find these people until I was 47. And I wasn't waiting one more minute. I'm like, what if something happens to any of us? You know what I mean? This has to happen now, this moment,
Yes. And it's your right to.
Absolutely.
We have every right to search for our biological family.
Absolutely.
I'm all for privacy. Everybody has a right to privacy. Just not everybody has a right to be anonymous to their biological child. That makes no sense.
I know.
So good on you.
I don't know if I've ever mentioned on the podcast before, but my mother and father, my adoptive parents, were very open to an open adoption or, a closed. It just so happened that because they went through, the state only supported private adoptions back then. So it wasn't, they really weren't given an option to have an open adoption setting, So they wanted that for me. They wanted for any child. That I remember them saying, it's every baby's right to know where they came from.
When my adoptive mother had that information, I immediately was like, if I had been asking my whole life about my mother, how long have you had this information? You thought suddenly I was emotionally ready to handle this information at 23 years old? What?
I know.
Clearly I was asking, and meet people where they're at. This whole thing about, we don't want to confuse the kids. We don't want to, they're not ready, and all this stuff. Kids are very intuitive and very smart. They're not dumb. And, we have this thing of keeping things from them. I'm like, they understand things better than we do,
And the damage that they're doing.
Children are...
As every day goes by, every year goes by, you're doing more damage. These are the people that you're supposed to be able to trust. Absolutely. 100%. And then you're going to rock their world, Yeah.
Listen, man, children are afraid of the dark. It's the adults that are afraid of the light. And, that's the truth right there. If you're afraid to tell your child something, you're afraid for some shameful reason inside yourself, and you need to go deal with that, because you also need to be a parent to this child.
Yeah. And I admire my adoptive father saying to me, what kind of jerk would I be if I tried to keep your history from you? He said, that would say that I'm insecure. That's what he said. He said,
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I remember being a teenager. He said, I know you love us. You love me. You loved your mom. You love your stepmother. There's nothing we would do that, where we wouldn't still be your parents. So they said, what kind of, well, I think he said asshole, but I don't think he said jerk. I think he said, what kind of asshole would I be if I tried to keep you from your biological family? He said, that would mean that I am so insecure in our relationship. That's what I mean. When I talk about how enlightened my parents were, they really were like super evolved humans. They really were.
And how validating and empowering for you. They're saying, this is who you are. We know who you are, and we love you so much, and we're going to embrace who you are.
Yep.
It drives me nuts.
Me too.
Yeah.
Because I wish what I had, every adoptee would have, and I know they don't. I feel like one of the very, very fortunate people. That isn't lost on me, but it's funny. I always assumed wrongly that more people had really great experiences like I had, and with the adoption, family. And wow, I'm finding my story might be unique in that respect, because my parents were just so forthcoming.
Yeah. I mean,
that's really special, though. That's really great. So with that, Kendall, and this is what I try to hammer home too with people trying to understand our situation. So with that, you and I had great experiences. I mean, and maybe some complications like any other family, but overall, very fortunate, good experiences. Yet we still had the desire to know where we came from, to know who our parents, to know our background, our culture, our history. We still had that desire.
Right. And not because you wanted to erase your past.
Exactly.
No, I just have to have the whole story. You know what I mean? My friend who was also adopted had just had no interest in learning anything. And I can't fathom that. If you have the opportunity and you didn't take it, I don't get it. But that's just the way I'm built.
It is a scary thing. It is a scary thing to go, to take that step to search. And it takes courage. Most people say, I want to wait until my adoptive parents die, because the guilt is over. Well, they don't want to ruffle those feathers and, experience maybe a second rejection from the adopted side. But it's very healing. And, we're a bridge to two tribes. I have my biological family, I have my adoptive family. And we're that bridge between two tribes. And it's why should one? Yeah.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, exactly. I love it.
Well, Brian, thank you for being so generous with your time and with your story.
This
has been wonderful. And can't wait to get to meet you in person, too.
Well, that was our conversation with Brian Stanton. Unabridged, unfiltered, and just as impactful as when we first connected. We're so glad we could share the full version with you this time around. As we celebrate 3 years of Family Twist, we're reminded of why we started this show in the first place, to create space for real stories about identity, family, and all the secrets and surprises in between. Thanks for being on this journey with us. Whether you're new here or have been listening since episode 1, we're grateful for you. And trust, there's so much more to come. Until next time, remember, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.